Okay. There are some questions about how you follow a low-carb, high-fat diet if you've got intolerances. So firstly, can we address dairy intolerance or lactose intolerance?
So for that, I think probably the easiest thing and the best thing is going to be coconut milk, coconut cream. To me, I don't eat dairy, and I use coconut cream for everything. So I will have coconut cream in my tea, and I will sometimes do 2 batches of stuff if I'm doing for Duran and the kids and for me. So I'll use butter for them and olive oil for me. So if we're doing a cauli mash, they'll have the version with the butter. I'll just add a whole lot of olive oil for me. And a lot of the time when I'm cooking, I will use coconut cream instead of dairy and just make one thing, and they don't know the difference most of the time. But that's the easiest option. I actually had a chat to someone earlier and they were asking me about almond milk. I think that almond milk it's higher in carbs. It's not I think the coconut cream, Paul agrees. I'm just checking. But I think the coconut cream is definitely going to be a better option.
Now, what about someone who doesn't like eggs or has an egg intolerance? Because eggs seem to be a strong feature in the low-carb diet.
Yeah, but I think there's plenty of other options. There's a lot of things that have egg in it. And I know I have friends who are not low carb and they always complain, when I read the ingredients. But if you're not eating packaged stuff, where you have to go and look to see if it's got egg in it, it doesn't matter. And if you're eating chicken and you're eating meat and you're eating dairy and you're eating and fish and all the other options, eggs are amazing, and I do use eggs a lot, especially for breakfast and dinners sometimes. But there are so many other options. So for breakfast, you do leftovers, you've got the salmon patties, you've got the meat casserole, you've got all these other options. So I don't think egg you really need to substitute when you've got all the other proteins that you're happy to eat.
Just on eggs, they're incredible in nutrition. Very few foods actually give you the variety of macronutrients that eggs do. So if you actually think about the constituents within the yolk, that's enough to support every system of the body. So I met somebody a couple of weeks ago and they were intolerant of the protein in eggs, but they were still able to have the egg yolk. And the egg yolk is where all the good stuff is. So if you don't tolerate eggs and it's because of the egg white, then I'd still urge that you try and get some yolks into you. And just as an aside, natural eggs, the grass-fed, the grazed, I'm not sure how you call it, they're better. You've probably read some of the things about yellow colouring being put into the feed of chickens now to try and compensate for the lack of nutrients, which is leading to these very pale yolks. So you give them a bit of colouring and the eggs look quite resplendent, magnificent, but it doesn't compensate for the poorer nutritional quality over the more naturally derived eggs.
And some people, I know a couple of people that don't tolerate chicken eggs but can quite happily have duck eggs. So that's another good option for people. And the protein and omega-3 ratios in duck and chicken are somewhat different. Some people don't like the taste of the duck eggs. It's a bit stronger. Personally, I think it's delicious. But that's just another option for people to try.
Karen, what kind of coconut oil do you recommend? There are different types. What would you choose?
So I've actually got a whole variety of coconut oils at home. I have a whole shelf full of them. And I was also just chatting to someone in the break before. I like the organic ones. I want the ones that are least processed. But having said that, there was someone that just said to me, look, I don't like the taste of coconut oil. And they sell, I think it's a Coles one, which is a refined coconut oil. It's an organic coconut oil, but it doesn't have the flavour. So for me, the cold-pressed organic ones are the least tampered with. So those are the ones that I will always go for. But it's same with the coconut milks and the coconut creams. You've got to find a one that works for you, one that you like the flavour and the taste of as well, if you're going to be willing to use it.
And we've heard a lot about butter. Are there different kinds of butter, grass-fed butter, and are some better than others?
Yes, 100%. And it's the same thing. It comes from, where the butter's coming from. So I'm a big believer that if the cow is grass-fed and healthy, living out of pasture, you're going to get a much better quality milk, so all my milk products will always come from like an organic. Ideally, it's not easy to always find because it's not often labelled if it's a grass-fed, but there are some butters out there that will say if it's a grass-fed organic butter. And same thing, if it's a healthy animal, any animal product, if you're getting an organic grass-fed, as close to their natural environment and not being tampered with, it's going to be a much healthier product for you.
Okay.
And I would say, just to add to that, I do use nuts, and I like macadamia nuts because also you've got to look, peanuts, pistachio, there's certain nuts that are much higher in carbohydrate. Yep. And so I do try to very much steer away from those. But things like macadamia nuts, I will definitely use. In saying that, if you are trying to lose weight, they are very high in calories as well. And I think it's much easier to eat a lot of, like you eat 2 eggs and you're usually good. You can eat I can go through a bag of macadamia nuts. Yeah, so I think people also have to be aware of how much they're eating when it comes to nuts, because especially like something like salted macadamias, you can go through a massive amount of those, and so eggs nuts are great, but I think just be careful which ones and just be aware of how much.
Just also quickly on nuts, they often contain a lot of undigestible constituents, so in excess they can lead to quite a lot of gastrointestinal distress. I've had more than one patient who's coming in complaining, and we've managed to track it down to excessive nut consumption. So just be mindful of especially things like almonds with the shell, things that are basically roughage.
And just on the subject of the ketogenic diet, if you're hungry on the ketogenic diet, what's the best thing to eat?
Fat. You need to be bumping up.
What if you don't want to have a slab of butter?
Well, this is where I use those things, especially like with the kids, and I say I definitely notice like they can sit in the car, they can eat their nuts, they can eat their avo and tuna mash, whatever, but I give them one of those fat bombs, and they're good, and they're good for ages. And we'll get to dinner, and I'm like, "Are you ready for dinner?" "No, Mum, we're not hungry yet." I'm like, "Well, you've got to eat because you're going to bed." So if you can find a way to condense it all, so that's when I will use nuts. I will use, I've got the macadamia, I use some almonds, desiccated coconut, a lot of coconut oil. So if you put that together, you get one big chunk of that, and that's a huge amount of fat in one dose.
I think it's different with kids and adults as well, because kids, we're controlling a lot of what they do, and we want to make sure they get enough nutrients. And as a 4 or 5-year-old, you don't really want to leave it up to them to decide should they have dinner or should they not have dinner, because they're at school. You don't really have control there. They don't have access to food. I think it's very different as an adult. As an adult, if you're not hungry, don't eat, and you really need to know what your hunger signals are. And we were discussing in the break, fasting is very useful because fasting lets you know when you're hungry. So when you're driving along in the car on the highway and you need to make a wee, you've got a slight urge, you don't pull over and just stop on the highway and wee. You wait until the urge is pretty strong until you get there. And the problem is, in our society, you get the tiniest little urge of hunger, and we've got food everywhere. So what's the first thing you can do? You've got a tiny little urge of hunger, you go and feed. And that's not what we should be doing. What we should be doing is waiting until we're properly hungry, then having a meal, and then not eating again until we're properly hungry again.